Okay, so no matter who you are, where you live, or what kind of personality you have experienced and you know what it feels like to be in an argument.
No, this isn't an argument.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. It's just contradiction.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
This is no time to panic. This is the perfect time to panic.
Scruffy-looking nerf herder.
Who's scruffy looking?
You can't even...
Zip it. Zip.
Look,
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Exhibit A.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
My name is Casey, and I'm the Central Director of Students. I've learned to be the peacemaker for the most part now, but growing up, that wasn't always true. If there was an argument that I was in, I would argue and argue and argue until my point was made, or until the other person was so exhausted that they didn't even care anymore. I wouldn't let it go. The most common arguments were between my sister and myself. We fought about things that most siblings fight about, like whose turn it was to sit in the front seat, or who controlled the remote, or whose turn it was to pick up the dog poop. The problem with my sister is that she had a similar mindset and would argue and argue and argue until her point was made, or until the other person, which was usually me, got so exhausted that they just stopped caring. But when the exhaustion technique didn't work, I had a secret weapon: sarcasm.
Excuse me, is this Sarcasm 101?
I was like a master wordsmith when it came to sarcasm. No matter what she said, I had a particular set of sarcastic skills, and I knew exactly what to say that would make her finally give up. When it comes to arguing, we all have a go-to style. Maybe your go-to move is always the be louder than the other person. You will simply talk at a louder decibel in order to drown out whatever it is that they're saying. Or, this is a pro move, maybe you're the subtly change the subject the middle of the argument until the conversation is about something completely different, and then you win that argument. That's next level. Or maybe you're the passive-aggressive one. You make a snide comment that appears to be harmless, but deep down you know that it cuts, deeply cuts.
Are you okay?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's great.
Or maybe you're just aggressive. You flip a table and just go on with your life. Or maybe you go silent. You retreat into your head or physically into your room, but everyone can read your face and knows exactly what you're trying to communicate.
Confuse them with your silence.
Everyone has a way in which they fight. It's the same way nearly everybody has something that they want to fight for, a subject that gets you ready to throw down. Here's what I mean. I'm going to say something true, and I want you to let me know how you feel about it, even right there in your groups. You ready? Okay. Cheerleading is not a sport. I know, for some of you that burns, but I'm kind of kidding. Competitive cheerleading, that's super intense, and I'm usually really impressed with the level of athleticism that those cheerleaders show. In fact, I would say that some competitive cheerleading could be classified as an extreme sport. Okay, how about this one? School should be all year round. Or the Astros are the best baseball team. Or Snapchat is better than TikTok. Or dare I even mention something about politics? You see, we all have subjects that we care about and triggering conversations that make us want to scream. Everybody has an opinion, and sometimes those opinions, they bring out the fight in us. But we all know that our arguments and fights, they don't stay contained to harmless, less personal topics like calling shotgun or controlling the TV living room remote. Our worlds are full of arguments, and the options are endless. Maybe for you, you want more freedom with your parents. Or maybe it's who should get the spot on the sports team. Or maybe for you, it's who has to actually do the project on a group project, because we know someone's going to do all the work. Or even more serious stuff like this. Who will win the election? Who should win the election? What should people do about guns or drugs or immigration or women's rights or just about any other divisive topic? For most of you, tension and arguments, they bother you. In fact, they're pretty annoying. You have enough to worry about in your own life without it. And when the world around you is in constant conflict, most people tend to do one of three things. Number one, they go straight to anger. You pick your side, you get angry, and you get mad at the other side. And so you fight and you try to change them, or you try to prove that your side is right. Number two, maybe you feel torn. You don't really know which side to take. Or you're not sure whether you care a lot about the argument in general. You see both sides, and with so many people angry and arguing about it, it makes it so hard to know where you should be. And number three, you couldn't care less. You're just here to watch the fight go down. You're happy to not be involved in the drama for once. When we really get involved in an argument, we all just want to do one thing. We want to win. That's our ultimate goal. And we all have a few tactics that we do, that we practice to help us do that. Whether you win through yelling, being silent, ghosting, showing up to the fight, talking to the person, talking about that person, everyone has the same goal in mind: to win. We want to win. And this has never felt more important than it does right now. Whether in our homes, on social media, or even in the culture that we observe around us, we are surrounded by big questions and big arguments for and against nearly everything. And with that in mind, in a time of unavoidable arguments, what are we supposed to do? How can we get better at arguing? How do we win? Today, we're going to look at a passage from the book of James, who was actually the brother of Jesus. And what makes James so interesting is that he didn't grow up thinking that Jesus was the Son of God. He grew up thinking that Jesus was just his older brother. And when Jesus left home and started teaching in the Judean countryside and traveling around with messages about what God was like, what did James do? He stayed away. It seems like James had zero interest in knowing what his older brother was up to or why. And honestly, I can't blame him. Can you imagine if your older brother was walking around talking and acting like he was God? Okay, some of you, that's a completely different story, but the point is the same. We can assume that James responded the way he responded because they were siblings. They may not have fought about the remote control or TikTok or Snapchat, but I'm willing to guess that they had conflict. And that's why it's interesting to read James and see what they had to say about conflict and tension and convincing others that you're right. Here's what James says. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to be angry. James 1:19. James probably spent most of his life doing what most of us have done with our siblings, being quick to speak and slow to listen. From what we read in the Gospels, James was super supportive of what Jesus was doing. I could even imagine that he was probably quick to tell others that his brother was crazy. He was probably quick to tell Jesus that there was no way that he was who he claimed to be. He was also probably quick to defend what he thought and why he thought it. He, maybe like you, was quick to make his point, to stand in that point, and then defend his position. Like you and I, he was probably quick to fight, quick to try and convince everyone around us that we are right. That is, until James realized that he had been wrong about all of it. By listening, most likely to Jesus' friends and followers before, or even Jesus himself, James began to see something he didn't see before. His brother wasn't acting like God, he was God in a body. He was who he claimed to be. And when James changed his mind about who Jesus was, it put everything else in perspective, including conflict. And so James instructs us to listen first, whether you're right or whether you're wrong, whether you know the whole story or you don't care what the whole story is about, whether you have a great clapback ready or you just don't want to say anything. No matter the situation, the response should be the same. Listen before anything else. Hear things from other person's perspectives. Listen first with the intent of learning instead of trying to change someone's mind. After we listen, James said that we should be slow to speak and slow to become angry. And this is important because it doesn't mean that we shouldn't speak at all. It doesn't mean that we should sit back and take whatever someone throws at us. It means that we don't speak reactively. We pause, we take deep breaths, we compose our thoughts and our emotions before we talk. Why? Because we've all been in a place where we didn't pause, we said the text, we yelled, we posted something, and we regretted it. Slow to speak and slow to anger means that we don't let our emotions determine our reactions. And when we do speak, we do so purposefully and in a way that is honorable. We all know what it's like to be quick to speak and quick to become angry. Think back to middle school. What were the things that got you so worked up? Now think about this. Are those things just as important to you now? Do they even matter to you now? I'm guessing not. I bet those arguments would even seem silly now. But you know what is important? The people you were arguing with. Your siblings, your parents, your step-parents, your friends, they matter now. And even if they aren't in your life anymore, they matter because they're people. In other words, often the people we're fighting with will matter far longer than the thing we're arguing about. Here's what I'm getting at. You never win an argument if you lose the relationship. We are right in the middle of a time when tensions are high and conflict is normal. In fact, conflict feels constant. Arguments are playing out in our homes, in our friendships, our schools, and all over our culture. And when conflict is everywhere, the temptation is to ask, how do I win the argument and prove that I'm right? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe instead of asking, how do I win the argument, the question we should be asking is this: how do I win the relationship? How can I talk about this in a way that if we don't agree, if they're never convinced that I'm right, that we can still be friends? Even if I'm never good with their opinion and their point of view, is there a way that we can be good? Not always, but if there is, I think that's a win. And that slight change in the question makes all the difference in the world, because it's no longer about making the other person realize that they're wrong and that I'm right. It's about making the other person realize that their relationship, their friendship, it matters way more than the disagreement you're having. And so there you go. All of your arguments, they're fixed. Pretty easy, right? I'm just kidding. I know that exactly 0% of this is easy. Real talk, figuring out how to handle arguments and conflict and disagreements, it has been one of the hardest parts about being a mature human being. And I'm sure it is for you too. We may not be able to change the way people behave when it comes to conflict, arguing, and fighting, but we can change how we behave in those situations. Of course, that's always been easier said than done when tomorrow at school your English teacher makes that political comment that makes you want to throw your textbook at him, or when your team captain makes a call that literally no one thinks is the right call. Or maybe it's when you get home tonight and your stepdad is talking about that thought that you really, really disagree with. That's one of the reasons that we have small groups that you're in right now. They are so important, more important than ever. It's a place for you to talk with real people about how ideas like this can work in your real life. And it's a group of people that can encourage you and challenge you to do the right thing even when you don't feel like it. And so as you head out today, I want you to think about one relationship that could be better if you practice this verse. And then challenge yourself to do just that. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry with, fill in the blank with that person's name. And that's how you win every time. You guys have a great week, have a great conversation in your groups, and we'll see you next week.